Greetings, church. First, I just want to apologize to our online worshiping community that we're not able to live stream our services today. I want you to hear it from me that we're frustrated, that we have tried all week to figure out the issue that's going on and get it resolved, and we've simply not been able to do it. We have some people who have been out. We have troubleshot what we know to do and just haven't got it figured out. We have some people who are coming this next week that we feel like can help us to get the solution and get it fixed, and we're going to make every effort to do that so that it's ready for next Sunday. But in the meantime, today we're doing the best we know to do, the best we're able to do to be able to provide online worship opportunities today. That's with this. I'm recording my sermon today is Thursday as I'm recording it for you so that we can have it up first thing on Sunday morning so that you have the sermon ready at the time you're normally accustomed to worship. But we also are going to be recording the 8:30 and 11 worship services. And as soon as they're recorded, we're going to upload them and post them on YouTube and then post the link on Facebook so that you can have that. We hope to have those, within an hour after the service is over. Each service is over for 8:30 and for 11. So know those things are coming. Today we're continuing on with our closing statements sermon series, and we're down to really our last 3 weeks of it. And I can hear some of you saying right now, thank goodness. This is one of the longer sermon series I've ever preached. I've been here. I'm about to hit 7 years here at Lebanon First United Methodist Church. And I can only remember a couple of times when we've spent this many weeks, 8 weeks, on a sermon series. Most of my sermon series go 4 to 6 weeks. I kind of feel like by then we need to change the topics, change the subjects, go to something different. I remember times like Lent where we'll do 7 weeks because that covers the time of Lent. But I can only remember a couple of times when we will go 8. I'll tell you though, it hit me as I was thinking about this. The other times that we've gone 8 weeks or longer, one of them was longer than 8 weeks, were both around the Sermon on the Mount. We did a sermon series on the Beatitudes that actually went 10 or 11 weeks. And then we followed it up with another sermon series on the Sermon on the Mount, and it was 8 weeks. And the interesting thing about that is that both of those happened in 2020. And I look back at that and I think, well, we probably didn't have anything else to do anyway, so why not dig into these things? But here's the important thing that I realize is that we've spent more time on things from the Sermon on the Mount and now John 13 through 17, the closing statements, that I've kind of started talking about as the bookends of Jesus' ministry than any other thing. And I think that's probably a good thing. It's probably appropriate because what I've said from the beginning of this series is that in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus told us what he was going to tell us, and then throughout his ministry, he told us those things. And then here in his closing statements on the night that he was about to be handed over to be arrested, he told us what he had just told us. He told us, reminded us one final time of those things that are so important so that his disciples will remember what those important things are so that they can practice them and live them out. So subconsciously, we've spent a lot of time as a congregation around these bookends of Jesus' ministry. These are important concepts that Jesus wants us to get because I think that at times we do the things that we think are important, and we focus our time and attention on the things that we think are important, not the things that Jesus tells us are important. There's a difference between the things that we think are important to our faith and the things that Jesus says are important of our faith. Because I think we Christians sometimes get bent out of shape on things that are nowhere to be found in Jesus' teachings and Jesus' ministry, especially that are nowhere to be found in the Sermon on the Mount or in these closing statements. And so it brings me to a statement that I think that I have been dancing around in my own life, that I think that we need to name, and that's as Christians, each of us has to decide, are we going to be about the things that we feel are most important? Or are we going to do and be about the things that Jesus wants us to do? Because too often times those things don't line up. The things that we think are most important for us to do are not the things that Jesus highlights are the most important things, the things that he specifically wants us to do. It comes back, I was thinking this week to Joshua, that Old Testament book. Many of us have that up on our you know posters and things on our house, where he says, choose you this day who you will serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And I think that's a great saying. It's something that we love to talk about, and it's heartwarming when we have guests come into our house and see that above our doorposts and those kind of things. But the biggest issue for us in choosing whom we will serve is not between choosing the ways of God or the ways of Satan. It's about choosing who we will serve between God and what I want, God and ourself. Because too oftentimes we choose self. That's what selfishness is, doing what I want to do or doing what I think needs to be done instead of listening to what Jesus clearly says in the Gospels over and over and over, the things we should be doing. I'll tell you, these last 3 weeks are toughies as we get into these last closing statements. Jesus is bringing it to an end. We know we're going to finish up John 16 today, and then the last 2 weeks will be in John 17. And then John 18 is the story of his arrest that leads to his crucifixion. But these are going to be things that challenge us, things that are going to be difficult that we may not want to hear, which is probably why Jesus ended with them. Today's text is the shortest of all that we deal with, and it's only 3 verses that we're looking at today, but I think it's significant. Of all the 5 chapters, this is the smallest piece that we're looking at. It's immediately after our text from last week, where Jesus says, I'm going to start speaking plainly to you, clearly to you. And they're like, thank goodness. We've not understood anything you've been saying. The text is immediately foreshadowing what's about to happen to Jesus, about how he's about to be handed over, arrested, beaten, crucified, put to death. But it's also, there's a countering here of an age-old principle that it's been referred to as many different things over different times, but we often refer to it today as the prosperity gospel. The prosperity gospel is the idea that if we are faithful to God and are living a good life, then God will bless us and will bring good things in our life. And if we're dealing with bad things, then it's an indication that we're engaged in bad or sinful behavior. This isn't a new concept. This is something we do talk about some today, but it's something that's been there from the beginning. In fact, there was a time when we learn in the Gospels that the disciples brought that mindset into a discussion that Jesus engaged them with. There was a time when they met a man who was born blind, and he just didn't meet their understanding of how this could happen. They saw blindness as a response to something that the person had done as a punishment from God. And because this person was born that way, they go and ask Jesus, who sinned? Was it his parents and God's punishing them through this man? Or did he sin himself in utero before he was born, that he would be born that way? They just couldn't get around that idea. They felt like this was some kind of punishment for God. He wasn't doing something right, so that's why he's blind. He wasn't living a prosperous life, and so God's punishing him. And so that's where they were. They were of that prosperity mindset. If you do the right things, if you do what God wants you to do, then God will bless you and will bring good things in your life and will prevent hardship and bad things from being in your life. And that's really not what Jesus was about. And he challenged that and came against that and chastised his disciples for thinking that way. Here's the thing. Of course God wants to bless us. However, we tend to relate those blessings to earthly material possessions. God's blessings are around the things that are eternal, not the things of this world. If you remember in the Sermon on the Mount, let's go back to the beginning. Jesus says, do not store up for yourself treasures on earth where moth and rust can destroy, where thieves can break in and steal, but store up for yourself instead treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy and where thieves will not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Jesus clearly frames it that our treasures should be on the things that are eternal, the things that will last forever, not the temporal things of this world like bank accounts and houses and cars and money and vacations and trips and those kind of things. Looking at Jesus' own life, he had none of those things. He didn't have any possessions. He had no home. He even said, the Son of Man even has no place to lay his head. In other words, he was a homeless person. If we judged his prosperity on the things of the world, Jesus was not very prosperous. And if we base it on whether anything bad happened to him or not, well, he was run out of the temple by his own hometown by the people that he knew, and they tried to kill him when he was a young man. And we know that eventually those who hated him and were challenged by him succeeded in putting him to death. He dealt with significant bad things. And so if we apply the prosperity gospel to Jesus' life, then he must have found hatred from God. According to that, he must be dealing with the punishment of God in his life. And of course, that is simply not the case. The prosperity gospel holds no water. And Jesus counters that today. He says in our text for today, I'm telling you this so that you may have peace. In this world, you will have trouble. But take heart, for I have overcome the world. I don't know about you, but I find it comforting that Jesus says clearly, you will encounter trouble in this world. In other words, everything isn't always going to be smooth. Things aren't always going to go your way. You will have to deal with hardship and trauma and pain. I'll tell you what I consider a problem in our world today. I talk to a lot of people all the time who say to me, everyone else's life seems to be so great. And my life is so hard. It's filled with adversity. My life simply doesn't measure up to the lives of others. And truthfully, I think the root cause of this is social media, because we oftentimes post on our social media the highlights of our life. When things are going great, we post ourselves on vacation. We post ourselves doing something fun or something exciting or something rare. We post ourselves getting all dressed up and going to the ball. We post ourselves doing something fancy. We're posting the highlights, the high points, the best parts of our life on social media. It's rare that I ever see anybody post on social media, well, you know, the dog threw up on my carpet today. My kid got an F on a test. He's struggling with his grades. We have so much credit card debt that I don't know how we're possibly going to pay it off. We're living at a level that we just can't sustain, but we feel like we have to. And my spouse and I are struggling in our marriage. We're going to counseling. I don't know if we're going to be able to make it. We're talking divorce. You never see those things on social media. In fact, I think of a time in my life when somebody came and talked to me, and they were telling me about how their marriage was on the rocks, and that they were struggling, and that they were needing help because they didn't want to get a divorce, but they really didn't see any other alternatives at this point. And they said, you know, I just wish our marriage was like so-and-so's. And they lifted up another couple that we both knew. The thing that I couldn't tell them was that I knew that so-and-so, that other couple, they were struggling with their marriage, that they were in counseling, and that they were trying desperately to avoid a divorce. But so-and-so couple, their Facebook page told a different story. They were lifting up the high points and trying to convince others, and truthfully trying to convince themselves that their marriage was going well. But naturally, this person believed what they saw on Facebook. Why wouldn't they, right? But those things aren't necessarily reality. They're definitely not the full picture. In this world, you will have trouble. That's a true statement. We've just come out of a week in which we recall the 23rd anniversary of 9/11, a very troubling day, a horrible day perpetrated by evil. Jesus said the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. I've come so that you will have life and have it abundantly. In other words, he's saying in this world, there's going to be a mixture. There's going to be forces that seek to steal, kill, and destroy. But that's not why Jesus came. He came so that we may have life and have it abundantly. Take heart, Jesus told his disciples in his closing statement for today. I have overcome the world. Jesus is saying this is a closing statement so that the disciples were clear. The next time they run into a man who was born blind or dealing with some other type of adversity, that this was not a punishment from God. But he's also foretelling them of the trouble about to come their way through his death and resurrection. In addition, Jesus knows. He knows what's about to happen in just a few short minutes. It's coming. They're on their way to arrest him at this very moment. That he knows that it's going to get tough on them quickly. And he knows that when he's arrested, when they strike the shepherd, the sheep are going to flee. They're going to run for the hills. Their behavior is not going to be up to what a disciple should be expected. And so in this statement, Jesus is telling them directly, I know now what you're going to do when I'm arrested. And it's not a surprise to me. The things that are going to happen in the aftermath of my arrest and my death, I knew it was coming. Hear me, he's saying. It doesn't impact my love for you. Church, hear this today. It's important. Jesus knows you will face difficulties in this life. Jesus knows that at times you will not respond well to those difficulties when you're in the face of adversity, when you're dealing with pain and hurt and trauma. You're going to respond as the disciples and flee and tend to self and not respond in a way that in hindsight you wish you had. We all do that, right? We all make mistakes, things that we're disappointed in ourselves in. In this, there's an undertone that Jesus is saying to his disciples, it doesn't impact how I feel about you, no matter what you have done, no matter the mistakes you have made, no matter how you have handled adversity in a poor way when it comes your way, I still love you. And he says this clearly in his closing statement today. In this world, you will have trouble. But take heart, for I have overcome the world. And the reason he says this to us, he says clearly so that you can find peace, that ever elusive peace in our lives. The same peace that he began his closing statements, if we can remember back to that by saying, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I don't give to you as the world gives, so let not your hearts be troubled, and don't let them be afraid. That's good news, church. Thanks be to God. Amen.